Potter is dead!
Obliviate. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Sandbox. Today is going to be another franchise ranking. However, this time with a twist. I'll be sharing my ranking on all the Harry Potter books as well as the movies. This is going to be a long one, so I will put timestamps in the description in case you're in a hurry. First, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the books based solely on the story, and then I will rank the film adaptations based on a few factors. I'm going to tell you right now that this list will bug some diehard fans, so if you're unable to hear someone's differing views on something that you love without humility and civility, then this might not be the video for you. I simply just do not look for the same things that others do within the Harry Potter community. What I look for in these stories are engaging plots that utilize the characters, the magic system, and the world to the best of J.K. Rowling's writing abilities. The world Rowling has designed is simply a classic in my eyes, and when the plot is exciting and has me turning the pages as fast as I can, that's when I think the books are at their best. And some I think just do that better than others. Sure, character growth is important and improved writing style is always a plus, but unless those things heighten the book's story and make it more fantastical, I kind of see it as a waste given the magnificent world and characters that Rowling has created. Not to mention, I'm a sucker for mysteries and dark elements, and some stories in this franchise simply knock those out of the park. Also, before I dive in, I'd like to mention that I love all these books. They're all so close, and honestly, I had a really tough time placing each and every single one of them. So my ranking is very different from others, where some believe that the ones at the top are just way better than the ones at the bottom of their list. For me, they are as close as the fingers on my hands. However, when I move my hands in a certain way, there is an obvious hierarchy, and thus when I looked at these books objectively, based on the story alone, I knew where they landed. Starting at the bottom of my book ranking is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I know some people are already tuning out as I speak, and I understand, but hear me out if you'd like. Half-Blood Prince is a really great story. There are some awesome nuggets of info in here, as well as captivating story arcs. The plot for Dumbledore's life, Snape proving to be the potion expert that he is, and learning about Voldemort's early life are all things that I really loved reading. Also, I think the idea of Horcruxes was one of the best additions to the franchise that Rowling came up with. The book is very well written and well paced, probably one of the best written books by Rowling in this series. The character growth is also very strong here, but I don't really care for the romance aspects of the story. Sure, it's great once Harry and Ginny finally embrace and admit their feelings for each other, but the drama surrounding the multiple love triangles was rather off-putting for me, and not what I wanted out of this franchise. And if it wasn't so heavily focused on that, I'd probably have the book a bit higher. Again, I enjoy this book, but it's not what I wanted from a world of wizards and goblins and Horcruxes. Right above the Half-Blood Prince, I have the Sorcerer's Stone, the one that kicked off this fabulous series. Getting to know the characters and the world was such a joy. Rowling is able to make you feel for Harry right off the bat and root for him. Watching him grow in his endeavors to learn more about his parents, become the youngest seeker in history, and defeat you-know-who felt so original and exciting. Plus, watching him, Ron, and Hermione start to form their unbreakable bonds was an absolute blast. While I think the story didn't feel as cohesive of a narrative as the others, I still think it was a solid introduction to the series. The idea of the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone, whichever you fancy most, which is used to turn metals into gold and produce the elixir of life, is not an original idea from Rowling. However, I do think it's a great tool that she plucked out of magical legends to use for her story. Rowling really set the tone for the franchise well, and as the characters grew, the stories and the dark elements grew with them. Which leads me to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Now, this is where we really get to start seeing who Harry is going to grow up to be. Rowling really starts developing Harry's unique character here, while giving more information about his past. The twist of Sirius being Harry's good-natured godfather rather than the violent criminal the Ministry makes him out to be, it really shocked me the first time I read it. It made me happy knowing Harry finally has some family that cares for him besides his friends and loved ones. But of course, Harry can't have anything that good for too long. Lupin becomes the terrifying werewolf, Dementors almost devour Sirius's soul, and Sirius is then forced into hiding after time travel shenanigans. And as you know, I love these dark elements, but time travel has always seemed a lazy writing tool to me. Don't get me wrong, when done well it can be awesome, such as in Back to the Future and Avengers Endgame, but the inclusion and reveal of the time turners at the very end of Prisoner of Azkaban didn't feel earned to me. I think Rowling used it well enough to settle all the outlying issues and was able to take away the time turners from following installments, but in the end, time travel is not what I'm looking for in a wizardly world. Now, in the middle of my ranking is probably the most divisive book, Order of the Phoenix. Growing up, the book was kind of big for me, and I can't recall if I ever ended up finishing it. It actually is the longest book, and if I did finish it, I didn't remember anything about the plot going into the film. And coming out of the film, it was easily my least favorite to date. I just didn't like it as much as the others. Maybe it was due to me growing up and the film actually lightening up after its predecessors, as opposed to embracing that growing darkness that the previous ones did. Or maybe it was due to Harry's teen angst, or maybe it was just something else entirely. It wasn't until a few years ago when I finally read the book and realized how good the story actually is. It was my favorite of the books in my reread because of that. I loved reading about Harry's academic and career pursuits. I think the prophecy was more enticing and a more interesting plot device in the book. The story just really flowed super well. However, now that I've had the opportunity to comb through it more closely and compare it with the rest, I still think that there are 3 others that just cater to what I wanted out of this series a little bit more, which is why I placed it here on my list. The first of those 3 is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is pinnacle Harry Potter for me. The idea of a wizarding cup where Harry is wrongly entered so that he can be used to revive the Dark Lord is such a perfect setup for the latter half of the series. The ideas and concepts that Rowling comes up with are just absolutely breathtaking. And building off of the Prisoner of Azkaban, we again see our characters grow not just for growth's sake, but because of the situations and challenges they are put up against. Harry, Ron, and Hermione all have their own squabbles. Hermione and Ron's romantic relationship is set up with a rather rocky start. Harry grows as a wizard, and Hermione grows as a person, with her setting up her society for the promotion of elvish welfare organization, as well as going up against Rita Skeeter's harmful tabloids. One moment that the film left out that is rightfully unnecessary for the film, but still a moment I loved in the book, was Harry simply learning how to use the Accio spell for his firebolt for the Dragon Challenge. It just shows how hard it can be to train as a wizard sometimes. And knowing what Harry has to go up against makes for some suspenseful intensity. The Triwizard Tournament was engaging, unique, and exactly the kind of thing I want out of this world, and Rowling delivered. And of course, the end with Voldemort finally coming on the big screen in his final form was beyond terrifying for me as a kid. But just above it, at my runner-up, I have Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I think this one was such a perfect conclusion to the Harry Potter saga, from being on the run from Voldemort and his puppets, to looking for the Horcruxes and uncovering their fair share of mysteries. This book grabs hold of your attention and excitement, and it never lets go. It rattles you, it shakes you, and it soothes you, all in perfect harmony. There's emotion with the reveal of Snape's true intentions and Draco's sense of loss and regret. There's fantastical dark elements with their capture and torture in Malfoy Manor, Dobby's sacrifice, and their escape from Gringotts. There's a legendary fable and MacGuffin plot of the Deathly Hallows, and finally the epic showdown at the Battle of Hogwarts where Harry and Voldemort finally duke it out. Plus the twist of Harry being a Horcrux and the true nature of Lily Potter's sacrificial love charm are both absolutely amazing. This book was just a perfect ending. However, at my number 1, I have, you guessed it, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This one has always been my favorite because it's honestly just a perfect sequel, which allowed for the others to be as good as they are. Every book after it relied on it doing what it did. It was a risk on Rowling's part, but she pulled it off, and that allowed the franchise to be so legendary. The first book was a solid introduction to the characters and their world, but Chamber of Secrets? That's the one that really set up the rest of the series. Some people complain about the lack of Hermione for a few chapters, and I hear your criticism, but if anything, I found it to be a bold move by Rowling in the end. Hermione may have been absent physically, but she still had an intelligent presence by leaving crumbs of clues for Harry and Ron to finally figure out what was going on in Hogwarts. I thought it was a brilliant tool that gave the chance to showcase Harry's and Ron's capabilities when they aren't relying on Hermione's brilliance. This book is one of the shortest, but it still gave us so much, which is a testament to not only Rowling's writing ability, but the pacing of the book. We have Dobby's introduction and his intervening in Harry's attending Hogwarts. We have the flying car, which has crashed into the Whomping Willow, which serves a huge role in The Prisoner of Azkaban. We have the mystery of the new heir to the Chamber of Secrets, Aragog the Acromantula, the legendary creature of the Basilisk, and Dumbledore's pet phoenix, Fawkes. And we also have the twist of Ginny being manipulated by the memory of Tom Riddle via his diary, which was put in place by Lucius Malfoy, and which is the first Horcrux we ever see. And to top it all off, we also see Harry being presented with and wield the Sword of Gryffindor. This movie ties everything together with its dark, exciting plot and surprising mysteries, and everything it does sets up the next 5 books in some shape or form. Whew, that was a lot, but we're still not done. The books are all glorious in their own ways, but now let's see which films kept that glory in their adaptations. So for the films, I decided that since you now know how I rank the stories, I'm going to simply rank the movies based on how I think they adapted those stories, along with the directing and the musical scores for each film. The stories are basically irrelevant here. I'm ranking the films based on how well I think they brought those pages to life. With that said, starting at the bottom, I have The Order of the Phoenix. Like I said before, coming out of this one, I was underwhelmed, and after finally finishing the book, I was able to see just how horribly they squandered this film. After the first 4 films having a variety of different directors, they brought on David Yates to direct the last 4 films, with Order of the Phoenix being his first one. I definitely think his direction improved and he was able to create a better vision for the rest, but Order of the Phoenix was simply not good. They shuffled around some events for no real reason. Maybe they thought it would be better for a screenplay, I'm not entirely sure, but looking back, I don't think they needed to rearrange any scenes. It was good in the book as it was. Secondly, the exclusion of Hermione's Spew organization from the Goblet movie means they had to abandon its progression in this film, which means we don't get any key scenes with Dobby, Kreacher, and Winky. Thirdly, there were some pretty big changes to how the trial played out and set up the story, along with Umbridge's greater involvement in the story. However, I do think that trimming those parts down was a good idea that didn't really hurt the film. In the book, we also get more information about Harry's parents through his occlumency lessons with Snape, but again, I think the film did fine with those scenes. The big kicker here that really changes this movie from the book is Harry actively working hard on trying to become an Auror. Following his endeavors in studying for his owls and getting the necessary grades was actually really interesting in the book, and they don't really acknowledge it at all in this film despite the one scene where they actually take the exam. They try to make up for it with a passing comment from Harry to McGonagall in the hallway during the Half-Blood Prince film.
Enjoying ourselves, are we?
I had a free period this morning, Professor.
So I noticed. I would think you would want to fill it with potions. Or is it no longer your ambition to become an Auror?
But I think the exclusion of this arc for Harry really hurt the movie overall. With Order of the Phoenix, not only did we get directing changes, but we also got a new composer with Nicholas Hooper, someone I had never heard of before. His track record is quite questionable for taking over and succeeding the likes of John Williams and Patrick Doyle. However, I think he actually did a fabulous job, contributing to the tonal shift of the franchise and coming up with some new musical leitmotifs for our characters. He went on to compose Half-Blood Prince as well before handing it off yet again to Alexander Desplat, who had composed the Deathly Hallows films. And in all honesty, I think Doyle's score was the best part of this film. Next up on my list is the Deathly Hallows Part 1. So of course, when they announced that they would be splitting up the final book into 2 movies, I knew the first film was gonna suffer from dragging on, and that's exactly what this one does. It drags on for just way too long, despite them cutting multiple scenes and plot points. They did away with Ron's sickly ghoul body double. They trimmed down Dumbledore's past with his sister, brother, and Grindelwald. They did away with the picture of Phineas Black and the Sword of Gryffindor's movements throughout the world. They watered down Lupin's arc with his son and even cut out a vision Harry has about the night Voldemort killed his parents. In short, they cut out a lot despite splitting up the book into 2 films, and then the first one still suffers from pacing issues. It picks up towards the end, to be fair, but really this film was nothing but a setup for the Part 2 finale. I also think this film suffers from the blandest musical score, putting this one towards the bottom of my list. Next up, I have The Half-Blood Prince. I think from here on out, everything film adaptation-wise is fairly spot on. This one was only slightly changed from the book, and I think every change actually helped the movie. The book was a large one, and the fact that the film didn't suffer in its crossing over to the big screen is a huge testament to the directing, producing, and screenwriting. The main reason this one is still towards the bottom is because I'm not a fan when films lack color, and this one just felt so diluted all the way through. The first 4 films all had their own interpretations, and yet they all felt colorful and lively as you'd expect the Wizarding world to feel. This film's color gradient was simply distracting and displeasing, which puts it below the top 5 on my list. Kicking off the top 5, I have The Deathly Hallows Part 2. Now this one also had quite a few changes from the source material as Part 1 did, however this one did not suffer from pacing issues. They changed a lot about the Battle of Hogwarts, such as the Carrows and Snape fighting McGonagall in the Ravenclaw quarters, which is where the Carrows summoned Voldemort in the book. The way Voldemort found out about Harry's plan was also very different in the book, and I actually preferred it. Also, Harry's final talk with Voldemort in the end was very different. However, since the movies are usually more watered down, all these things I think help the film flow a bit better. The score was much better and lively here, giving us a few classics, and the direction was the most solid that Yates has given us. All in all, Deathly Hallows Part 2 sent off us fans with a solid entry. Next on my list, I have Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This film is basically ripped right out of the pages, save for only a couple things. Seeing the book come to life is extraordinary, and I love what they did with the Dementors and the werewolf scene. It was very haunting and definitely the highlight of the film for me. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of the score. I think Williams was trying to do something different, and I appreciate that. It would definitely be pretty boring to have a carbon copy of the soundtrack for 8 movies straight, which is why I think they kept the composing fresh by bringing in someone else every couple movies or so. I just didn't like what he did for this one. Overall, I think the movie adaptation came out great, though I do think the 2 above this had better directing. At number 3, I have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This one has a few key differences, such as the stuff at the Quidditch Cup. I think what they did in the film was fine, but I just wanted to note that. As I mentioned before, they decided to cut out Hermione's arc with Spew, and thus we didn't get Winky the elf either. Skeeter and Hermione's rivalry was downplayed in the film, and lastly, they cut out the Sphinx in the Maze Challenge. Overall, nothing game-breaking. I really enjoyed the film. I think the screenplay was one of the best in the franchise. Mike Newell did a fantastic job at coming in and directing one of the best Harry Potter films. And for such a critical story in the series as well. Much respect there. I also think the score was one of the best. However, there are still 2 that I think absolutely nailed it. At number 1, I have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, with Chamber of Secrets taking my runner-up spot. And the main reason here is that both being directed by Chris Columbus and scored masterfully by John Williams, they absolutely nailed the comparingly shorter books in the series. Williams found a way to make each score unique and in tone with the feel of the movie, the first being this magical, wondrous soundtrack, with the second embracing the dark and mysterious. The reason I put Chamber in the number 2 spot, however, is that they all but got rid of Percy Weasley. He actually had a fairly big role in the books, being a prefect who was embarrassed by his family and trusted the ministry more than them. He is in the movies, but only has minor speaking parts in the first few films, and they're almost all while he leads the students down the hall. The Sorcerer's Stone omitted the Chalice Challenge, in which Hermione had to correctly guess the correct cup to move onward and save the stone. However, I think the Vine scene showcased Hermione's brilliance well enough that cutting out the Chalice scene was a good idea. So there you have it. That's my list for all the books and films respectively. Let me know down in the comments how you would rank them, and let me know what you'd like to see me rank next. Stay safe, everybody. I'll see you guys next time. So, Hogwarts. Really? Was Toad Mucus taken? Also, you know what I never understood? Voldemort was convinced that Snape was the rightful owner of the Elder Wand because he killed Dumbledore rather than himself. So to kill Snape, what does he do? He has Nagini kill him? And we know from Fantastic Beasts that Nagini is actually a person, which would mean that, yeah, very sloppy, Mr. Riddle.